everyone. Welcome. I'm Christine Salas, the HTPA Community Director, and I want to welcome you all to the HTPA Healer Development Series to deepen your healing touch practice. Today's topic is on anxiety, and we have a fabulous panel of practitioners and instructors to share their knowledge, skills, and expertise with you on working with clients with anxiety. So a few things I want to mention before we get started. We are recording this event and it will be available on the HTPA Member website. We will save questions for the end. And I will ask you when we get to that part of the program for you to put your questions into the chat box. And we will do our best to get to as many of your questions as possible within the time that we have. And now I want to introduce our lovely panelists. So we have Pauline Shore. She is a retired RN and college teacher in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. She has a TESL certificate and a master's in education with a focus on teaching English as a second language to adults. She's been a certified healing touch practitioner since 2015. Pauline has a small energy healing practice of mostly friends and family. Through a local agency, One Care, that focuses on the needs of the elderly, Pauline instructs exercise and Qigong classes to seniors on a weekly basis. With her husband, she enjoys cycling the converted rail trails of Southwest Ontario. And most of all, she delights in the adventures and dreams of her 6 wonderful grandchildren. Welcome, Pauline. And then we have Irene Bigot. Irene has studied energy medicine with Janet Menken for 6 years in the late 1980s. She has been a mentor throughout her nursing career since 1968 and a healing touch mentor since 2016. She was an early instructor with Janet Menken. She continues to be a healing touch instructor. Irene's experience is in oncology, med-surg, and clinical settings. Irene has a dual master's in science in chronic health conditions and nursing education, which includes psychology and spirituality. Irene has a degree in psychology with a minor in sociology. She also is a certified spiritual director, Caritas nurse coach, end-of-life doula, and harmonic energy instructor. She has been involved with caring science from newborn to elderly. She has written a curriculum for spiritual care and taught it for 20 years. Welcome, Irene. And then we also have Verna Besselink. Verna has been developing skills in energy medicine for over 25 years. She is a certified healing touch practitioner and instructor with the Healing Touch program. Verna loves to treat and teach from both the scientific and spiritual aspects of energy medicine. She works to help patients understand the energy systems of the body and how one can use this to support healing. Welcome, Verna. And last, we have Deborah Bleski. Deborah holds a bachelor's in science in nursing and a master's degree in education. The majority of her career has been focused on school health nursing and clinical instruction of health career students. She began her study of healing touch in 2001 and became a certified practitioner in 2006. Besides healing touch, she has studied holistic nursing, therapeutic touch, hypnosis, Reiki, distance healing masterclass, and aromatherapy, and also has a certificate in healing touch spiritual ministry. For several years during the summer, she offered healing touch weekly to patients in a large medical center. And it was during that time that volunteering that she experienced her most sacred moments in healing. She is presently retired and enjoys offering healing touch to those facing a life-threatening illness, experiencing grief, or need support around surgery or medical issues. She finds that in our world at present, many report some level of anxiety associated with the stressors inherent in dealing with the pandemic. So welcome, Deborah. So I'd like each of our presenters today to just tell us a little bit more about themselves and their experience in working with clients with anxiety. And I'm gonna ask Deborah if she would go first.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Yes, I became a Healing Touch practitioner in 2001 rather. And I want to thank Verna Besselink for coming down to a little group of 6 of us to teach down in Glasgow and Saugerties, New York. And I have found such a rewarding career in Healing Touch. I especially have worked in the medical center with people who were dealing with anxiety from a diagnosis, from testing, from surgeries. So I have had a lot of work with anxiety of various forms, from people who were mildly anxious to people who were in a panic state. And Healing Touch has never failed to help them to feel better. So I'm very grateful for that. And right now, my practice consists of referrals from family and friends. And I have done quite a bit of distance work as of late. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. And Pauline, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
I just want to say that I was introduced to Healing Touch at the age of 65. I had not heard of chakra in my life. I was trained in hardcore nursing in Cambridge in England many years ago. And so this was a whole new opening up to a new world that and more am I thrilled and can't imagine my life without energy healing, particularly Healing Touch. And I was introduced to it by a wonderful nursing professor at the college where I was coordinator of English language studies. She was a nursing professor, and I think many of you may know her, Kathy Moreland. I haven't seen Kathy for a long time, but I'm ever grateful to her for opening up these doors. I worked primarily with international students and newcomers to Canada, adults, and that's one of the most humbling experiences, to work with people who've come from refugee situations or as immigrants to start a new life in Canada with families, not always at a young age. But I was always so impressed, if I ever had opportunity to speak with them out of class, how open they were from these other cultures to energy healing. And that is very affirming. Recently, because of our pandemic, I've been ever grateful that I'm retired. And my heart goes out to the young people who are dealing with this change in our lives. And I see ever more anxiety on small scale and large scale. And I feel this is where our energy healings can help. And yes, and I really appreciated that opportunity that people have given me to help them.
Great. Thank you, Pauline. And Verna, would you tell us a little bit more about you?
Well, thank you, Christine. I am so delighted to be on this panel and to see all these wonderful people coming in. I'm sure they've even got more information than us. So we will definitely share at the end. I got into Healing Touch way in like 1995 area. And thank goodness, because when the floods hit Southern Alberta, I'm up in Canada in 2013, the town that's close to us where my son lived was totally decimated. Everybody was displaced. The whole town flooded. And it took it's still recovering from the flood. So I did 15 clinics and brought in some practitioners from Calgary, and the anxiety and post-traumatic stress and that was a real good learning curve for me. And the results were amazing. Even if we got to be with our code of ethics, standards of practice, but even just standing beside people, you can help calm them down. and realize what's there. So that was huge for me to see the anxieties around, and animals too. I worked on the animals too during that time. And then that just got everything ready in Alberta for the 2015 Fort McMurray that burnt down in northern Canada. The whole town had to be evacuated then. And so some of the gals that worked with me, practitioners, did open some clinics up to help people with anxiety. I was asked to go up, but I was still suffering from compassion fatigue from doing those clinics and being who I am and getting my practice on board. And right now with the COVID in Canada, my clients, most of the clients I see right now out of Vibe, I'm in a Vibe Health and Spine Clinic in downtown Calgary. Most of my clients have anxiety. That's where most of them are right now. And I'll share more of that later, but I'm delighted to be here. And we all have some anxiety from time to time. So we need to be aware of it. So this is a wonderful panel to be on. Thank you.
Thank you, Verna. And Irene, will you share a little bit more about you?
Hello, everybody. And I am also very delighted to be on this panel. And, anxiety has been in my own life. And I have a small practice where clients, almost everybody has some sort of anxiety related to their condition. And it's been quite interesting working with them. So, and I use a lot of, tools to help them relax. And it's just been a wonderful experience. My practice is very small, which is fine with me. And I've been working with people online because of the COVID. And it's been making a major changes in their lives. So I'm so happy to know about Healing Touch and to have been blessed to work with Janet back in the early days for several years. So thank you everybody who is participating too. And thanks you, Christine, for coordinating all of this. Bless you all.
Thank you, Irene. So I'm going to move on to ask some questions of our panelists. And the first thing I'd like to ask a couple of you to talk about is what common intake and assessment and energetic patterns you find with clients with anxiety. And I'll ask Verna if she could maybe share a little bit about that.
So we all have this beautiful intake form that we use for Healing Touch program, and I'll refer to that in a minute. But I think it's really important for us as practitioners to do your preparation. So I'm going to talk about the clients that come in and that have anxiety and the ones that don't. So I mean, there's kind of always going to be that category for us. So if you know that they have anxiety and they're coming in, then you can sit and do your grounding meditations, asking for your guidance and everything else we need, and then really coming to that heart-centeredness and asking for that support around the issues that they're going to be bringing in with them. I think that's huge. I got taught years ago, you should be spending at least 15 minutes before each client. Well, we don't all have that time. And as we get older, as you see gray hair, we can become quicker and faster at that. But I would like you to think about your intention to ground. I intend to ground. I intend to work with this person specifically around anxiety, if that seems to be the underlying condition of them coming in. If you do that, you will find that that whole session will be amazing. As you know, we just have to practice those, that I intend to ground, I intend to be fully present with my client, and I intend to address the anxiety problems as gently and kindly as possible from heart-centeredness. And we always have to remember those things. So I'm going to go to the intake form. So the intake form is awesome because as you're going through it, now I don't go through the whole thing sometimes because somebody So I'm going to talk about a client comes in, they got amazing, like their anxiety's like all over, and you can recognize it and know. So, you don't, to settle them down, obviously we know the techniques of breathing, getting them to sit. I had one client who couldn't even get on the table for a while. So it's being mindful and present, like you all know what to do. And so if you get into the intake form for a person that you're not aware of that there's anxiety, because I'm going to let the people talk about all the techniques that you can do with healing touch, and they're coming up later. So I'm going to skip over that part. So you know they're anxious, you're going to use your techniques. If you don't know, you've got to be really careful with you. And I know some of the psychologists online will probably comment later on this, which would be great. But we got to be careful we don't trigger a full-blown anxiety attack in your office, and how we address and talk. So it's always coming from that gentle kindness. So when you're going down and you're not sure if they have, sorry, in the primary reason for coming on your form, it's the third item down, says right there, anxiety and depression. So when it's all about observation there. So talk to them and look, and if you tick it off and they doing their scale, which is the next column, like areas of concern on the second column and the fourth down, then that might be an opportunity and time to ask them a little bit more about what they're feeling at that time, especially if you're getting energetic information in that I need to stop. So we don't always have to be on autopilot going through these forms. I think that's really important to the client, that we're totally present for them. So, and also it's really important for us as practitioners to notice the symptoms of, so us visually noticing, like, are they feeling nervous? Are they restlessness? Are they increasing their breathing? Are they sweating, trembling? I've had all this in my office, feeling weak or tired, and then trouble concentrating, even in your room there. So sometimes I take this form and I go, okay, it's important to do interventions now. It's important to just stop. If we're talking to our client and they're starting to show anxiousness and all this things coming on that, then just stop and start doing some treatments. And interesting enough, your client will give you more information as they're on the table or in the chair, and you can, we're smart, we'll just write that down later. Because sometimes just you even writing all this stuff down will make them feel anxious. And so we need to be very mindful of the client in front of us. I think with all techniques that we're doing with them, being in that mindfulness. Now I'm going to skip over to Irene here. She's my pal here, and she's going to talk more about the patterns that we see. We know that anxiety comes from fear, and Irene's going to talk more about those. So I'll let you talk about those more now, Irene.
So thank you, Verna. So one of the things that we do in assessment is looking at energy patterns is the pendulum. So usually in the clients that I worked with, the anxiety that I find, or the readings on the pendulum, is compromised. All the chakras are compromised. And I especially focus on the root chakra because that's where fear comes from. The positive part of the root is having strength, and the limited part of the root is fear. So, and then the navel, the positive part is creativity, and the negative part is indulgence. So one can be, I have had clients that are very indulgent. They just want to hold on to their fear. They want to hold on to their anxiety. It just kind of makes them comfortable, which is not reality. And the solar plexus, the power is vitality, and the limitations are weakness. So that has to be with holding on to that fear or that anxiety. And the heart, the power is compassion, and the limitations is sensitivity. So it's just sensitivity to everything that's around you. So I find anxious people to be responding anxiously to everything they see or they touch, their whole environment. And for the throat, the positive area is courage. And the limitations are instability. And of course, an anxious person is very unstable. It's their function, it affects their daily function. And the brow, the power is intuition, and the limitations are delusions. So, you know, anxiety is not really real to the person, it's imaginative. That's what I find in my clients. And the crown, the power is wisdom. And I find the limitations as being indifferent to them. So anxious people have problems distinguishing what is real and what is not real. So with the energetic defense systems, I also find my clients feeling like a porcupine. Then we go into the hand scan. And the hand scan to me shows in my clients a porcupine effect. So, and it feels sharp and it helps the client give a distancing. And another important energy pattern is feeling really, really tight, like setting up a boundary, a thick field. They want to set, they want to be away from everybody. And also I've experienced a sucking pattern. So that means the anxious person is trying to get help. And it's, wow, it's really something else when you feel the client's energy sucking you. I felt that twice that I remember very clearly. One is when I was trying to show a client, actually it wasn't really a client. It happened when I was in the process of transferring information to another nurse I worked with. And she walked into the room and I could feel her sucking me out. And I had to move away from her to my desk until I settled down. But I also found it in a client that I was working on. And it was pulling me down. And I can't get over that. So I'm looking at another energy disturbance, which is a verbal denial. So in that, the lower part of the body, I found the field being very weak, a light, a light sensation. And from the shoulders up, it was very spiky. So, and the color that came to me was yellow, meaning that the person was in their head. And their lower half, they just felt pale. Their physical appearance was pale. And when they have problems with verbal denial, they're denying their anxiety. You may pick it up on the assessment on the intake, but the client may not realize they're in anxiety. It's related to our subconscious so easily. Most of us don't know what's going on in our subconscious. And I'm looking at the besides me, anxiety, where the fields, you may feel the field closer to the body on one side and more pushed to the other side, more open to the other side. And this kind of trauma or anxiety can accumulate over the years. And so it's, and then there's a pattern of withdrawal. We know anxious people will tend to withdraw, and the entire field will feel very weak, but also there's a energy coming off their head. So where do we have our anxiety, our thinking? It's in our head. So I feel like a field that is round, that is coming through the environment, and it leaves the body in a cloud of light. There's a glazed look on these clients. So every anxious person demonstrates differently. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of you in the audience have worked with anxious people and, you know, have experienced different patterns. There's a ton of patterns. There's tentacle patterns where the client would go, the energy would go out like tentacles, and or withdrawal arrows. And there could be a combination of it in the lower body and the upper body. So Jeepers says quite a bit about energy patterns. And I will let, if you have any more questions, we'll save it for the end. And I will let Pauline and Deborah go into healing touch techniques.
Yes, thank you, Irene and Verna, for answering that question for us. And yeah, moving on to healing touch techniques. So which healing touch techniques do you commonly use with clients with anxiety, and what's your rationale for using those techniques? And you know, why do you think those particular techniques are more effective than others? And yeah, we'll start off with Pauline.
I find it's characteristic of someone gripped by anxiety that they feel alone, that they feel they're not relating to others out there. And I feel that it's important that they, first of all, know that they can be empowered. And so I usually work initially on the breath. And it's amazing for us, you know, we very commonly work with breathing and breath in our capacity. But for many people, it's just something you do. And I usually start out by asking them to wonder with me at this amazing capacity to breathe, that it go to sleep and we still breathe, and that, but we want to work with that breath to harness it. So I work with them gaining attention of their breath in a slow and gentle way. That idea of gasping in and short, swift breaths sort of tends to buy into the polyvagal idea that the fight or flight is to be initiated. So we work on that with that formula of in through the nose gently to 4, pause for 2, and then out for 5 or 6. The formula doesn't matter, everyone has a different one. And gently out through pursed lips. I model that. We work on it together. We try and bring ourselves into sync with that. And then my next thing that I work on is another technique that, again, many people who are anxious have to be grounded to do, and it's not just that easy. But we work on visualization, and we talk about their favorite place in nature, and then asking their guide, who can be a religious figure or just someone who loves them and who will support them, that they can feel connected to, because I feel with anxiety, those connections seem to be frayed. And we visualize their favorite place. I ask them to close their eyes and to tell me about it, to tell me all the sentient experience of it. What do they smell? What do they feel? What do they hear? It's on a perfect day. It's their own place with this supportive, loving guide at that time. Then I have found that for me, one of the most effective techniques, and I'm wondering how much of it's because I really like this technique myself, but I'm often guided by pendulum to use it, is the spiral meditation. And I have several reasons for finding this effective, in as much as I love that it starts with the intentional heart connection. And I personally have my own little mantra, and I have to thank my amazing mentor, Cindy Palalchuk. Some of you may know her, in London, Ontario. And it's from my heart to your heart in peace. And someone who's anxious is looking for that sense of peace and quiet, that groundedness. And to speak to clients about groundedness who've never heard of it before, we need more concrete sort of hints, techniques to take us to that groundedness. And I say that little mantra to myself as I ask the guides to come in and help me with my healing. I visualize, I don't see lights, colors. I think because I came to healing touch at a later age, but I know it's there and I feel. And I visualize energy as spiraling. I've read of it as spiraling. We visualize the chakras as spiraling. And so I feel that the actual spiral of the technique, the spiral meditation, with that spiraling of the chakras, has a very soothing, for me, and I see this, feel this, I don't see, I feel this in my clients, that idea of settling and grounding. And I pay particular attention when I get to the root, as Irene mentioned before, that where fear is initiating anxiety probably at this time. I find particular time spent there. I find that the movement of the spiral covers the vagal, the polyvagal nerve system. And I came to this fairly recently, but I'm so right on it, after reading Dr. Stephen Porges' work on this. And then earlier this year, thank you, Healing Touch, we were introduced to it through Bonnie Thompson and Christy Joy, the polyvagal theory for healers. And I was sold so much on that. And I feel that that movement of the spiral is actually covering that that ventral vagal nerve path. And so again, I feel that idea, because the anxiety comes out of that, sort of putting the fight or flight dorsal vagal path to sleep, to rest for the time, and open up that ventral path. So with intention, I'm tracing that path, the ventral vagal nerve too. On completion of the connection of the chakras through that, I find that magnetic clearing technique is a powerful, gentle, emotional clearing. Provided the person hasn't expressed that they have particular pains, then I may do a pain drain or whatever is appropriate then. But I find that magnetic clearing technique is just so soothing. And then when I close the spiral, I hand the energetic work to the client to go forth in their own healing. I intentionally do that this is my part now. I hand you the capacity to continue to heal. So that's my, I found my most successful, and yeah, my suggestion.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Pauline. And how about you, Deborah? Could you share with us a little bit about the healing touch techniques that you use?
Yes, certainly. One thing that I really work on is a very good attunement with the client, because I think that when our fields are in sync, it's very important. It establishes safety for them and a connection with me as a safe presence. I start with a very, very gentle hands in motion, usually. very, very gentle. And with, because I find that when you're working with someone with anxiety, you don't want anything sharp or sudden. You want everything to be with a motherly touch, as I think in polyvagal, they brought that out. You want to be very calm and centered yourself, and then you can really provide a safety, a safe vehicle for them, for their energy. And then after some gentle hands in motion, I will start with magnetic clearing. That is pretty foundational for me with people who are anxious, any types of anxiety. And that technique has worked with clients that I've dealt with that were mildly anxious to almost panicky, or having a very fright response. So that is something that I really work with. And Janet Menken developed magnetic clearing as a full body treatment for emotional clearing, quote unquote, among other indications. And Dorothea Hoverkramer stated in her book that it assists in releasing, quote, emotional debris and unresolved feelings such as anger, fear, worry, tension, and anxiety, end quote. So that's really a technique that is really endorsed by Healing Touch for anxiety or any type of stagnation and debris in the field that may be of an emotional nature. Another technique that I found, and I must say that I do a pre-energy assessment, but I really feel that interviewing the client is really the way I get my most information. It's really through interview and intuition. And sometimes I'll even be starting a technique and then I'll get a hit that, no, you need to change to a different technique. So I will. I'll change to something else gently. But another thing that I use is mind clearing, especially if a client is saying to me, I have racing thoughts, I can't sleep, I'm so worried, and it seems to be all in their head, and it seems to be, driven by a mental state of worry and dialogue that they can't get rid of. So mind clearing, according to Healing Touch, balances energy flow in the head and brain and promotes relaxation and a sense of peacefulness to quiet the mind. So I have used that, and I've had people have great success with that. So those are basically the techniques. Later on, I'll talk about a case where I did use chakra spread, and that also helped with anxiety. So there's a variety of techniques that Healing Touch offers us for that.
Great, thank you. So now I'm wondering, how often and how long are you typically seeing your clients with anxiety? And what's the duration of your sessions when you're working with someone with anxiety? And Pauline, would you mind answering that for us?
Yes, I find that the 45 minutes to the hour is definitely, because Deborah used the operative word, I think, to work when working with these clients, is the gentleness of it. That gentleness of approach, not that we rush at any time when we do this, but a particularly, even with the breath, I speak I think language is so powerful. I talk about the gentle breath and everything being gentle in their life at this point, because their prickliness is just the opposite of that, the antithesis. Initially, I'll see people weekly for up to at least 3 weeks. And until until the client themselves can say that they've mastered what I call the tools in the toolbox. And the toolbox tools are initially the breathing and the visualization. And it's like we talk a lot about neuroplasticity today, which is really kind of posh word for changing habits or establishing habits. And to deal with the state of anxiety or change in people's lives, which quite often initiates this, we need new habits. And it takes some time to establish those. So this idea of the breathing and visualization, I will, and the visualization with someone there to help them, their guide, their helper, their loved one, whomever they wish to call this person. And I will say that if you need to call me at any time, and we'll work through those tools in the toolbox. Like Deborah, I will later on give them more advanced, like mind clearing to do, but I think initially those two small techniques are enough for them to handle in those first 3 weeks or so that I would definitely see them weekly.
Great, thank you. And Irene, could you share a little bit about your, how often you see clients with anxiety and what you're finding?
I believe it varies. It varies on the client themselves. So what we all aim for is to have a smooth flowing field and to have the chakras in balance.
Mhm.
So depending how strong the anxiety is for that individual, it may take, 3 sessions, 5 sessions. I feel like it's important to see an anxious person more frequently in the beginning, like 2 or 3 times a week, and then lessen the amount of visits and just keep good listening from your heart to what they're telling you at each visit. Is their anxiety decreasing? Are their problems improving? That type of thing. And, I also work with the clients in having them realize that the anxiety is underlined by a fear. And it may be a fear that's not really true. Sometimes the anxiety situations are true and sometimes they're not. So I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but it's important for the client to write down and share it with the practitioner about what's causing their anxiety. So the frequency really depends on what I feel is the changes in the chakras, that they become more open and the field becomes more smooth. I feel that's, and it varies. Again, it varies in each individual. So maybe Pauline wants to add to that.
I concur with you entirely, Irene. We read the client, we feel the client, but frequently at the beginning, that idea of them feeling alone and needing that support is so important. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And how about, common observations or evaluations that you're finding with these types of clients? And Verna, would you talk a little bit about that?
I sure can. Thank you, ladies. All your information is wonderful and right on target. Observations. So I'm looking at observations as what's happening now. After you've done your sessions and that what's happening now. So what's happening for the first time that you're in your room with them, our documentation is so important. How's their breathing? Are they, less flushed? Are they stopped sweating or whatever you observed in the first? Do you see a change? That's just part of our teaching. Do we see a change? So important to just point form that even after they've left the room. because you don't know the next technique. You might change your technique and then it's not effective as the other one. That's why I like to, when I see a client, if I have a client that the anxieties, it obviously gets better with healing touch, but I'll lay my forms out and I'll read each one before they come in. What's the patterns? Like the observation to me is looking back at your documentation sheets. Are they presenting better at the end? Because they're gonna, you're doing your hand scan and you're talking to them, and that gets back into client feedback. But the observations is important. Is it changing? Is it accelerated after? Sometimes, if you do a chakra connection and they're not ready for that, because it puts a lot of energy in the body. And I agree with what all the ladies are saying. It's that smooth gentleness they come in with the full-blown anxiety. And that goes into me at the end is what happens if nothing happens? So we have in our toolbox, are you ready to refer them? Do you have somebody that you could suggest they go see? It's really important that we keep that list of names of people that we trust we trust our client with. And if it comes to a point of when do you refer? Well, you refer when the techniques are not working. Or they may come in and tell you they're already seeing somebody, and you may suggest to them through my observations of doing energy work with you. I love how Pauline and Irene said the frequency is important. Sometimes I see people 2-3 times a week just to get them settled. And then if that pattern's not changing, it's not holding either. So that to me gets in the observation. If those patterns aren't holding that you've created, or they're not doing their homework, perhaps it's time to get help. I think it's really important to know our limits and where we are with people, and talk to another colleague in Healing Touch. That's why we have our friends and our colleagues there. Like, geez, I got this client. So the observations to me is like know when to refer. Make sure you know if they're seeing someone for anxiety or who they've seen, because they might not like them. And then isn't that nice that you can refer someone else, right? That's about all I'm going to say about that, about observing. We all know how to do it. I did have a client that I had to get pretty strict with. I've known her for years. Okay. I've known her for 10, 15 years, watched her kids grow up, actually 20 years. She was so bad one day. I told her, I said, if we can't get you to ground, I'm talking bad, you guys. I said, my next step is to assist you to go to the hospital. She couldn't ground. She got on the table 3 times. She got off the table 3 times. We went outside. We hugged trees. I did everything in my power and practice to support her. And I did come out and say, if we don't find a tool that works, you're going to need some interventions that I don't have. And she looked at me and she said, I think I'll try harder. Which is okay, but I really believe that we need help sometimes, and we need to observe and be aware, not to let our ego get in place. We got beautiful techniques, but some people need more. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so important for us to remember. And Irene, is there anything you want to add to that as far as your observations and evaluations of clients?
I support Verna and everything she has said. And I think it's very important when we look at evaluations and observations, is the client doing their homework? Whatever the plan is. I know later on, Pauline and Deborah is going to talk about the plan, but, to decrease their anxiety, it's critical that the clients work on their plan. And if they come back to you and they say, no, I didn't work on the plan, to explore with them what, why they did not do that and what is interfering with that plan. So I think that really affects the results that we're going to get. So, and listen to the client's feedback. That's just wonderful. I also think in this area, it's very important that we maintain the documentation pages or the session pages
Mhm.
and refer back to them. It's, it's so easy for us to say, oh, I know, I remember what was going on with these clients, but go back to your session page of the previous session and compare to what's happening at this moment. So I hope that helps. So I'm moving the plans to Pauline and Deborah.
Yeah, thank you, Irene. And, you mentioned client feedback and, want to ask a little bit more about client feedback. What are you all finding? Are you finding that clients experience some relief after, let's say, the first session? What are you hearing from clients? And particularly also, with a lot of times with clients with anxiety, they may be taking medication for anxiety. And so curious also, what change in their medication are you finding as you're working with them? And I'll ask you, Deborah, to share a little bit about that.
Okay. So I have had very good results with this technique. And I've used it quite a bit with hospitalized patients at Albany Medical Center in New York. And, I've had mostly it's disbelief. Mostly after the session, they can't believe how much better they feel. So it's really disbelief. Like, wow, I really feel relaxed. I've had people say, what was I so upset about? I can't even remember. Call me an angel. You're such an angel. I had somebody that I helped with this technique in the hospital, and this person had a roommate that was very, very noisy, always on the phone, lots of visitors, and it really was bothering her. And when I was done with my session, she said, I didn't even hear her. It was remarkable. I feel so much better. So when I've worked with people with magnetic clearing, which was really my go-to with hospitalized patients, just because you're just seeing them once and it's not an ongoing relationship, I've just had so much success with that. And I think the key word for me was they just couldn't believe how relaxed they felt after the session. So really great. I have not worked long distance. I have not worked for a length of time with someone who was on medication with anxiety, but I did, interestingly enough, work with somebody that had COVID-19 and was hospitalized in New Jersey. And that person would tell me that after sessions, their O2, their flow rate for their oxygen would be lessened. They would not need so much oxygen and they would still be able to get by. And that was a great relief to them. So that was my experience with any type of medical intervention being decreased, was the oxygen.
Great, thank you. And let's see, Irene, could you add a little bit to that?
In the plans, we're talking about the plans, right? So I would say
feedback and results. Aren't we on feedback?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. So we got to feedback and results. So yeah, I agree with Deborah in that I've had clients say, that is so wonderful. I am very relaxed. I realize that I shouldn't be concerned about anxiety. So I had one client who always was worked herself to, what if this happened? What if this happened? And I says Jeepers, you're going to the future. You have to stay in the present. And she kept on responding that way after about 3 sessions. And after the third, I had about 6 sessions with her. But after the third session, I did refer her to a psychiatrist who put her on some medications. And the medication did not agree with her, so she stopped it. And she kept on seeing a psychiatrist for counseling, but I also worked with her in a form of counseling and teaching. And I believe after about 6 sessions, she was okay. She realized that she needed to be in the present and not in the future, which hasn't happened yet. So that, I think that was one of my major results. I had another client who actually, I was seeing her for hip pain, and she was going to have future surgery on her hip. So what she kept on doing was injuring herself, meaning the weed whacker, wrapping it around her ankle. And to me, that was an underlying anxiety where she was avoiding the surgery. And the surgeon would not work on her unless her, hip was free from any possible infections. So, but then we got to that point and she was able to have her surgery. So that was another form of anxiety. And I think the results were great in that she succeeded to have the surgery. And I did see her after the surgery too. So anything else?
Great. That's great, Irene. Thank you for sharing that. You all have touched a little bit on, the homework, right? And the plan for the clients. And so I'd love for Pauline to share a little bit more about that, as far as the what types of referrals and growth work, self-care, that you're working on with the client.
Excuse me. I think I feel that I need to be specific with the homework. I don't usually call it homework, I call it self-care work. But I will often follow up with an email after the visit, reminding the client of the breathing that they're going to work with and the visualization that they're going to be empowered with. Because that idea of leaving the office, someone who is anxious may well be in a different place when they leave, but as they leave, they're alone. And both Irene and Deborah mentioned that idea of the client saying, yes, thank you. You've been so good, so helpful, because we connected. But as they leave, that feeling of loneliness again may be overwhelming. So again, with a follow-up email, just reminding of those 2 little tools in their toolbox. And also affirming to them that self-care is not selfish. Self-care is essential to well-being. That's how we need to be able to help anyone else. We need to self-care. To be able to function well, we need to self-care. And I think that's something that it sort of goes in the toolbox too. Words of empowerment, maybe a mantra. I have an example of a success that I had with a young girl, but would you rather us do that later, wouldn't you, Christine? Not right now, just the toolbox now. And I call it a toolbox because it's very tangible, the idea of the toolbox, and that it's not just for this time now when they're feeling anxious. It's a toolbox for life, that these techniques, these tools can be used forever, and they're with you forever. And I find that and it will be a little bit later when I add such things as the mind clearing or a sort of what I call a modified spiral meditation by holding their heart and just doing a spiral around their body. If they don't hit each chakra, they are doing it as they move their arms. That idea of self-healing. But they're not the initial tools that I give them. They will be once I feel they're ready for that extra step.
Great.
Anything else on there? No, I think that's probably.
Thank you. And Deborah, would you mind adding to that?
Sure. I also work with someone that has anxiety with the breath work. So the long exhalations. When I was working with the person who had COVID and was hospitalized and having the breathing difficulties, I said frequently, long exhales, long and slow exhales as best you can, as best you can. But as far as visualization, I do ask them to try to visualize putting roots in the ground and connecting with the earth energies. And even if they can get out and have their feet on the ground and they can do their energetic roots there, that's ideal. And also to accept the healing energies from the earth. That's another possibility for them. I do ask them, if possible, to limit caffeine and stimulants. Somebody that I recently treated was having latte with 2 shots of espresso. So I suggested maybe you can make one of the shots decaf, or, try to kind of cut it down. Sometimes people don't make a connection between what they're eating and drinking and how it will affect their anxiety. So I say, if possible, if they can cut down on their caffeine, like, a cola drink, coffee, energy drinks, and chocolate, that may help them to see, just see if it helps you. It may have no effect, but we don't know till we try that. To eat a nutritious diet as much as possible, to make connections in nature, to take a walk outside, to look at the shrubs, to look at the birds, the squirrels, who's ever inhabiting their area. And, if they're open, and I haven't found everybody's open to this, but if they want to do some self-healing, I could always teach a mind clearing or scudder, either of those to help them, or even just, very simple hands in motion can really just be so quieting, even just to put their hands on their heart and just do their breathing with their hands on their heart can really be very comforting to them. So I think that's pretty much, and I usually schedule a week out, and then I just see how their chakras are responding, how their field is, and how they feel. So we just kind of take it as it comes with that.
Great, thank you. And Deborah, would you mind continuing here and maybe just sharing a success story with us of a client that you've worked with?
Sure. I have documentation. The disadvantage when you work in the hospital and you volunteer in the hospital is you do your documentation at the hospital and you leave it there. So I chose to highlight a case that I actually did from my home. And this was a distance healing case that I did. Someone that I knew was having surgery for a cancerous thyroid. And I reached out to this person. I asked if they wanted me to work with them. They knew me. We had been former co-workers together, and she happens to also be a nurse. So the original intake, her pain level was 0. Her anxiety level was 10. And she told me that her fear was in not waking up after the surgery or during the surgery. She also said to me, half jokingly, if you drove by now, let's just get in a car and we'll just keep driving so I don't have to have my surgery. So all very understandable in that situation. And this is situational stress or situational anxiety. Unlike a general anxiety disorder, this is situational. So when I did her pre-treatment assessment, she did have, her chakras were open and they were clockwise but small, except her left shoulder, her whole arm was counterclockwise. I seem to do arm and leg evaluations, I think because I have read it in the Barbara Brennan book, that's how energy can enter the body through the arms and legs. So it's just my thing that I always do. And her field had a lot of static, was very thick. So the healing touch interventions and rationale I used with her, I did because of her racing thoughts. I did a very good attunement with her. But then I went into mind clearing. I also did chakra spread, because chakra spread is used in times when people are having special needs, such as pre and post surgery, or they're entering a new phase in their life, etc. So chakra spread was using. I also use something that I learned from Dr. Mary Jo Bulbrick, who is a teacher in healing touch, and she also has her own energy school where you connect shoulder to hip, and then the other shoulder to hip, and then the root and the crown. And I always finish all my sessions with that. For this particular person, I also did chakra blessing, which is also a Dr. Mary Jo Bulbrick technique, where you come up from the root, you go up into the crown, cross over and go through the various chakras. And I knew this person would be okay with it. She's a Catholic person, and I knew that I wasn't crossing any religious boundaries that I shouldn't be with her. I blessed and released her. Post-treatment, her anxiety was only a 5. And then when, let's see, I also gave her a mantra. I took the mantra from a Karen Drucker song, actually. It all is well. We will rest. We are safe. All is well. And I just wrote that out on a paper, and I took a picture and I texted it to her. And I asked her to just please go over that, or words similar to that, about being safe, that she is safe. And I asked her to call on her angels to help her and to help everyone that is assisting her in her surgery that morning. So when I connected with her the next day, actually, I didn't connect with her the day of surgery. I connected with her the day after surgery. And she said she was calm and she was ready. She said she just walked in there. She said, I was calm and I was ready for my surgery. So I felt like that was a very good outcome for her.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Also just want to allow Verna to maybe share a little bit about any challenges that you have possibly faced with working with someone with anxiety, or anything else that you think would be helpful to share that we haven't shared yet.
Thank you. This has been excellent. I find that, I mean, it's all the techniques are amazing and they do work. I guess it would be, some of the challenges would be, are your clients doing are they pulling the tools out of their toolkit? So the challenge for us my goal with all my clients is not to see them. Our goal is to get them to a place where they don't need to be seen unless it's something else. Thanks, Deborah.
Right.
So it's like they're gonna keep coming in, and they're gonna keep coming in because they love the energy work. So the challenge for us is to constantly watch the patterns and to see if there's other things we should be working on besides anxiety. And I think it's really important after maybe 5 or 6 sessions to go back through your intake, the original intake that you did with them, and do another little bit of intake. How are you now overall? And then it will absolutely support them. I'm big on notes. So I've even had to show them to clients because they don't believe they're getting better. So I say, well, look at here. You know, look at the pattern here. This is good, right? So it's important to me to show them, and we sometimes may slip and forget that. It's so important to show the client, empower them. I think Irene used that, or Pauline. We need to empower the clients that they can do this. They can manage this. They're amazing people. And to see if there's tools. If they don't like the tools you're giving them, give them something else. Like I had a client, I'm going to brag a little bit here, but I worked with her for 2 years, a lot of stress and anxiety from abuse as a very young child right into adulthood. And I said to her one day, I said, look at where you came from. Like, look at all this. And she was like, yeah, I am doing better. I said, yes, you are. So when they have these little minor setbacks, I think it's important for us as practitioners to say, but look at where you were before. You know, this is much better. And I think it's a challenge for us to remember that we have these the documentation is there for us to use and to empower our clients with. I would think, this hasn't happened to me, but I'm going to throw it out there, but I think we need to be very careful with codependency. I think that you got a client that, you know, wants your personal phone number, and you know, they're just getting a little too, or deflecting what's going on with them and getting you to talk more than them. I mean, those are all techniques that we need to learn. I hope one of the psychologists here will talk about that a little bit, a little bit more about being careful with the codependency. Maybe Deborah, maybe you'd like to speak about that for a minute, about the codependency part and what that might look like.
Yes. One thing I do want to say is that it is very helpful when I explain to them in reference to them doing their homework and being diligent about it. One of the reasons is we want to lower the baseline of their anxiety. Mm-hmm. If you do some self-care, you lower your stress levels so that when something does happen, it's not such a big spike that has to come down. If you're starting here rather than here, you're better able to handle it. And that really resonates, I think, with people. But yes, I do believe that we need to really establish good boundaries. And we do need to make sure that they are becoming more self-reliant. We're giving them tools so they're not texting us, oh, I'm in a panic.
Exactly.
Oh, you don't want that, because it's just not good for either of us.
You mentioned the energetic boundaries, and I want to mention this to all the practitioners out there. I mean, Cindy Dale's got wonderful tools and techniques about energetic boundaries, but it's also about what is your field doing as they're walking into the room. You may be making them anxious. I can make people anxious. I know that. I have this huge aura, like most of you, and it's not prickly, but it can get a little too happy sometimes. So when I have someone coming in, I'm really conscientious of bringing my aura in so I'm not overlapping them so much. So you can expand yourself to get a feel of what they're feeling if they're very closed and quiet, depressed, but then you can bring your field back in so that you're not overlapping them all the time. And like I said, the book with Cindy Dale, Energetic Boundaries, is wonderful. So I think that is I don't struggle with that, but I'm very aware of it because my energy's like big. I was at the 2005 conference, and who walked onto the stage? She walks on the stage and she said, "The biggest aura wins." And then she was walking back off the stage. It was funny. Well, I thought it was cute back then, but she was really bringing up a point that we get so expanded, it can affect your client. Right. So we just, those are challenges, I think, that we don't seem to think about. I think that's all I had. And you know, just referring to their care plan and always empower them that they're doing better, especially when they are. And even if it's just a little bit, who cares? It's a little bit. And
Yes.
it's those little bits make those little steps make the giant steps even better. So
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
and some people have anxiety all their life. It's just how they're made up. So it's how do I manage it? And boy, we got lots of tools. So just that's all I'm going to say. But it was delightful to be able to talk about that. So thank you. And thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Verna. And Pauline, did you have something to add to that?
Yes, I just very quickly like to speak about a success story I had, because I realized, and before and even more as people have been speaking, that sometimes people need to tell us what specifically makes them anxious. And I had a young client that I had seen before for anxiety, and she was doing quite well. And then she started university at the beginning of COVID, which is enough to put anybody into a state of anxiety. Because she had nothing that first summer to do, she continued to go to school. I'm sure she's heading for medical school eventually. Organic chemistry was really tearing her apart. So she came back to me in a tearful state, and we worked on Zoom. And then this last summer, she came back because she'd started a part-time job in an optometrist's office, and there was so much to learn. And people were saying to her, "I've told you that before," and get a little short with her. So we went back and reenacted what she did when they told her something that maybe she hadn't done quite right, or they hadn't told her before. And her reaction was, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And she said, and then they'd look annoyed. So we talked about that. Well, let's have another tool. And her tool was, and we play acted for a little bit. We did it about 5 times. I would be that person in the office, and with her new reaction of, "Thank you for telling me," and smiling. And she would do it, and we would laugh, and it went so well. She was so thrilled the next week to come and tell me how people's faces were surprised and lit up, because it's all about that relationship. Quite often the anxiety is a relationship with someone else, and that she was now armed with this other tool, and the fact that she had seen that different reaction. And then we talked about her innate capacity to change and to heal, and she could see that herself. So it was just so delightful for me to see those few small words as another tool in her box. And I said, well, you can use that forever. When someone tells you something, don't go sniveling. And I could understand why the people would react to that after a while in that way. But her new confident sort of response was getting a different response from them. And that it's all about not just her energy, but their energies too, right?
Thank you for sharing that. That's lovely. So it looks like we have about 10 minutes for questions. And so go ahead. I do see a couple questions, which I'll start with those, but go ahead if you have a question, if you want to type it into the chat, and we will do our best to get to all of them. One question that I saw from Leslie and Rich is, have any of you used chelation with clients? And if so, what were the results? Doesn't seem that any of you have, huh? Go ahead, Irene.
So yes, when I feel that the client is plateaued, and one of the last techniques that I use on the client is chelation. It may be like the last 2 visits, because I do want this anxious person to be at a higher vibration when I first started working with them. And it does make a difference using chelation. I also want to add, since my part of my background is the spiritual director, and in working with the clients, I also have them do some rituals, if they have sacred rituals to focus in on, that gives them some security. And also about prayer in their daily work. So if they're doing something like washing dishes, to pray about going in there. The Jewish culture prays about 1,000 times a day. They even pray when they go to the bathroom. So their success in what was eliminated from their body. And, you know, a lot of cultures have beads that they use. You know, Catholic culture has rosaries, the Hindu and the Buddhists have beads. So I think that's very important. And it's interesting to know that Aristotle, years ago, looked at anxiety by working with clients on their sight, their sound, and their touch. So here we come, as Verna said before, come into the treatment room or even on the computer online to look at the site. What is the client seeing? And if they can identify things, this is part of grounding. And the sound we use. Do most of us play some music when we work with the client? And the touch, that is our gentle heart-to-heart, mild touch to the client when we do our techniques. So I don't know if that all helps.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to touch on using chelation with anxiety clients? Okay. I'll say in my experience, when I was a student and I did chelation on, you know, I think it was a friend that I did it on that was experiencing anxiety, it was too much. She told me to stop. It was too intense. And that was a mental note, like, okay, that maybe is not the first thing to try.
Yeah, I agree with Irene. I think it would be something to be used at as their anxiety is dissolved, or you see it at a different point and try it, because it's a pretty strong technique, and their energy system, unless we've built it up to their frequencies, their frequency is getting higher than it kind of blow out their circuits, I think, a bit. And if your client has to stop, good for you.
Yeah.
That's always ask the client, how's this feeling?
Yeah.
One of the techniques, I know that people are asking about tools, and one of the techniques I asked my clients, for you people, what is one of the techniques I've asked over the last 2 weeks that they love the most? And you know what they love the most at home or wherever they are? Putting their hand on their forehead and one behind their neck for 2 to 3 minutes. And they can do it anywhere. They don't need a pen and pencil or a computer or drink or ground or tree or whatever. And I said, thank you. So that is one of the techniques that they've found, that when anxiety is coming up, is to start holding their head. So we know that that relaxes the transmitters. They're putting energy into right into the pituitary gland, and you know, it starts to settle down. They're running energy down. They don't even know they're doing this, by the way. They're running energy down the spine, getting all that nervous system calmed down. So that's an excellent technique. And there's other tools. Irene, I worked in a church for years with teens, and it's just writing those gratitude journals out. What are you grateful for today for? Even all us healers, we need to do that right now. What am I grateful for? We're getting our little rants on about COVID and what it's doing and not doing, and you know, how we're not apart and we can't have conferences and all this stuff. So, you know, we have to do that too. What am I grateful for? You know, I'm grateful to pay taxes because I have a job then.
And I think it's so important to write down what you're grateful for.
Yeah.
Because, you know, writing down is a great neurological connection to the brain.
Yeah.
And the vagus nerve is located behind the muscle in the neck. And if you put your hand on that area, it will also help with the anxiety. So anxiety is triggered off, you know, through the vagus nerve, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. If your client gives you information that they're constipated at the end of the intake, that's also related to the vagus nerve, you know, that controls that part of the body. So that's a pretty special nerve.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and talking about the vagus nerve and that, when we had, like, you got like 12,000 people in one community anxious and stressed, and they're all in different centers. And so one of the things that I would teach clients, and this comes back from a fitness exercise, is the Kegels. So you're pulling your urinary tract in, you're pulling your butt in, and you can do this in a lineup, and it will reset the fight or flight, which causes a lot of anxiety. And that's where they were. So those techniques are, you know, I tell them, do it while you're waiting to pay for your groceries. It will release anxiety, and it's, that no one even knows you're doing it.
Great, thank you. And we had one other question here for Irene from Jill. And Irene, can you give examples of how you explore why a client did not go through with their self-care assignment?
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was how to explore the self-care.
How do you explore when a client is not following through with their self-care?
Oh, I just smack them.
Now.
When they're not following through on their homework, I just ask them what interferes with it. What is the issue here? Are they anxious about doing the homework? So, and then I go through, I wait for the answers, and I go through what mutual plan can they do for the future? There's got to be one out of the many you know, techniques that we can give them for homework. It's got to be at least one. So I'm wondering if the anxious person is, if we give them too much homework, too much plans, and maybe they could just do one simple thing, and it might be walking out in nature and seeing God's creation and knowing that they are part of God's creation and everything will be fine. Maybe a small scripture they may like, or, you know, a quote from Buddhism. So I'm not the Buddhism expert, but if the client is of a Buddhist tradition, I would ask them, you know, what is there that can help you calm yourself down? And trust is a big thing. Just trust in the universal power that things will be okay, and give them that activity. I think the most simplest activity is, as I said, is walking out in nature and looking at the creation and absorbing the energy from what's out there. And the second simplest thing is like praying in their daily work, and positive thinking, a positive word. It could be serenity. It could be just the word serenity, which is pretty neutral. And or one of the words that are used to describe God, like Abba, or Yahweh, or whatever tradition they're from. And I think this is going back to the intake. It's also careful or mindful of the practitioner to look at the intake where where we ask, do you have a spiritual tradition? Do you believe in a higher power? So to deal with anxiety, that is so critical, and to expand on that with the client. Most of us practitioners are kind of set back from expanding on that spiritual question that we give to the client. And I think it's critical for the plan too.
Great.
I hope that helps.
Thank you. Well, it seems like that was it for the questions. So I'm glad we got to them all. So as we're closing here, thank you so much to all of you for participating in today's event. A very special, heartfelt thank you to our 4 panelists. Weren't they just great? I loved all the information they shared with us. Thank you so much to you for volunteering and taking your time to share your knowledge with all of us to help us in our practice. If you enjoyed the event, if you have suggestions, I would love to hear anyone's feedback. So please email me. I'll put my email in the chat. The next Healer Development Series topic is going to be on depression. And I'm still in the process of finding panelists and kind of scheduling that event, but you will all for sure receive an email with more information. Due to some of the feedback I received from many of you, I will, for the next Healer Development event, I will be making it a registration so that you can get the Zoom link right away as soon as you register. It'll still remain a free event for HTPA members. And finally, if you're a certified practitioner or an instructor or know someone that would be interested in being on a panel on a future Healer Development Series topic, please email me. And trying to multitask here to send my email through the chat. There we go. And yeah, thank you so much for being a part of today's event, and thank you for all the healing that all of you bring to this world. Thank you.